Okay, great. I'm glad I did that. Because, I came here really prepared to give sort of a formal presentation, and I will go through my notes, just because that will allow me to make sure that I cover sort of the trajectory of information and sort of arguments that I wanted to cover, but I think it would be great if we had some time to have some discussion. And I myself am on a learning curve. You know, I was educated, I was an English major, and then as many English majors, did a doctorate in psychology, and spent my career, it's a funny thing. I think it's because English majors are coming to being English majors with the same questions that psychologists come to. And really devoted my career to working with traumatic stress, and then very much became less a clinician and more of a consultant working with organizations and getting into disaster psychology and post-traumatic stress disorder. And the last thing I was doing before this took over my life was working with international NGOs on occupational stress associated with working in disaster and development situations across the world. So things sort of came together when I, in 2006, actually went to Palestine and saw the whole thing for the first time. Even though I'd been there many times and lived there as a younger man. So I have become a theologian and a student of politics, and very much still on a learning curve about that. So a lot of you know a lot more about some of those things than I do, and I have a thick skin. So if you need to clear me up on some things, that would be terrific, because that's what I'm up to in this project that I seem to have undertaken. I thought that this weekend that I would try something new, which would be to open up my presentations. We're talking about two societies in the second half of the 20th century. Both societies were in deep trouble, whether they knew it or not, because they were practicing legitimate, lawful, institutionalized racism. And both societies underwent really revolutionary transformations as a result of grassroots movements that basically came to delegitimize those structures and push fundamental change. One case was a world power that was pretty much in charge of themselves, and they thought in charge of the rest of the world. One was a nation that was rapidly working to establish, was experiencing a lot of economic growth, and really wanted to take its place among the first world, and faced becoming completely isolated in the rest of the world because of the policies that they were pursuing. So the first, of course, is us, and I'm talking about the civil rights movement. The second is South Africa. I see that both societies underwent an important transformation that really helped them to become more legitimate and live up to the ideals, in some sense, of the original founders. But both societies were in peril. And both societies, of course, are still working to complete the process that was beginning. The point is that the politics changed as the result of movements that came up from the bottom, from the grassroots. In the case of South Africa, it really, to some extent, became a global movement. There was a global movement that supported the internal movement. Now, of course, that's very broad, and it's very simple. And maybe the benefit of not being a historian is that I can keep it broad and simple and naive, and it's like true. The same thing happens to me with theology. I sort of, not being a theologian and not having a seminary education, I sort of look at what I'm reading and look at what I'm hearing and say, well, that doesn't make sense. What am I not getting here? And the fact is that what I'm seeing does make a lot of sense, and it brings things down to the fundamentals. Now, you'll see where I'm going with the two examples that I brought. I'm here because the state of Israel and the Jewish people itself, whoever we are in that kind of peril, are in that kind of urgent need of transformation. And when I say urgent, I mean urgent. I mean, I've been saying this for years. It's getting more and more urgent, but effectively nothing has changed, and that's what's making it so urgent. About 2 years ago, I attended a conference in Boston called, something like One State for Two Peoples or something. We called it the One State Conference. I heard Ilan Pappé speak for the first time. I had read his book, and
we had him speak here just.
Yeah, okay. If you haven't read his book, it's a hard read. Every once in a while I just put it down because it was so upsetting.
Who are you talking
Ilan
about?
Pappé, P-A-P-P-E. He wrote a book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. He is an Israeli historian in exile in the UK. And he got up and basically, as an Israeli, he just appealed to the audience. He said, we are really, really in trouble. Now, this was right after the Gaza incursion in early 08, 09. And he used the G word. He said, Israel is involved in genocide. And what you saw in Gaza, if you didn't believe it before, believe it now. And it's just the beginning. It's a test run. We're involved in genocide. He used the G word. And I think he used it on purpose because he wanted to make sure people were paying attention. And this is the voice that's coming out of Israel now. Voices from the academy, particularly from the academy. Not from the left, political movements, but from the academy. Historians, sociologists, saying, please help us. And I'll get back to how I think we need to help them. So the idea is how to, people say, well, are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine? And of course, these are ridiculous categories. But if people want to nail me down, I say, well, okay, I guess I'm pro-Israel because I feel like the work that I'm doing is about the most pro-Israel thing that can be done. I would like to save Israel in whatever way it can be saved. It's going to have to change. It's going to have to change radically. It's going to have to change fundamentally. People say, well, are you an anti-Zionist? And somebody asked me that the other day, and I said, yeah. And we can talk more about that. So my story.